Brand. So that didn't work. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Everyman Podcast. This has been already a night of huge technical glitches, from olives up noses to no Wi-Fi connection to no hotspot connection to Lewis just absolutely ruining, not playing an intro. So yeah, if that's the sign, if that's all the bad bits of the podcast out the way nice and early, we're on for a winner, right? How are you doing tonight, Nathan?
Yeah, very well, very well. Appreciate being asked to come on again. Returning guest, I'm happy.
That's it. The first ever returning guest of the Everyman Podcast. I'm sure there will be a few who want to come back on. There already has been people to message to come back on for different parts of their story. But I know you listened to our episode last week.
Yes.
So we were speaking about it last night briefly. And I just thought it was a really good time for us to basically talk about addiction and gambling in a different way than necessarily just a personal story. So what I mean by that is, essentially last week I opened up on my story and my experience and what I'd been through. But I think bringing on an expert like yourself and really getting to maybe some of the deeper level of what addiction is, what it means, how people can cope with it, because I can only share my lived experience, right? It's not something that I'm not a true expert in addiction, how to treat it, how to overcome it. It's just not my area of expertise. So we wanted to get you back on tonight and probably touch upon further parts of addiction, how it works, and how people can overcome it.
Okay.
So I think a good place to start would be to briefly remind people of what your story is, what your journey is from sort of where you were before, because you haven't always done what you do today, to then sort of where you are today and the work that you do.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, my sort of journey began in 2012 when I went into residential treatment for addiction to cocaine, alcohol. I wouldn't say I was a gambling addict, but I had problematic gambling as well.
Yeah.
And struggled for, I would say, 10, 15 years out in the madness. And, I was listening to your episode last week, really powerful. And it just reminded me where I used to be when you were describing, the madness that you were in. And it's just from where you were to now, every credit to you. But I think in relation with myself, it took me to bankruptcy, possession of cocaine, lost relationships, lost houses. It just absolutely decimated my life. And then, I just could see that I'd got caught drink driving. Then sort of a year after, I decided to, enter rehab ever since then. So my journey then began really of, entering into treatment in 2012 and not really looked back since then, thankfully.
Mm-hmm. Class. Yeah. So when you talk about like your story and where you've been from to where you are, do you know when you were going through those periods of change from, so I'm probably thinking where I'm at now. I'm probably a couple of years down the line from my addiction, and it's moving into that part of like, I'm over the thought of gambling. I'm definitely over that. But it's the idea of how do you get fulfillment in other areas of your life? Like, what did you do to get those? Because I'm finding I'm never going to get those super high endorphin adrenaline hits unless I start jumping out of planes or something, and I'm definitely not going to do that. But like, where and how did you replace those sort of hits with?
So I think for me, I took up long distance running. That helped me immensely. So in terms of, I was always told, find something which you're going to find quite challenging, but also, so it's really going to test you, because if you just don't replace it with anything, then you'll just end up relapsing over and over again. Willpower alone won't beat it. So I think for me, it was all about exercise was key. I went to 12-step groups. So I found that AA and Cocaine Anonymous very helpful for me. But also, what else did help me in those early days? I had to change my friends as well, because my associating with a lot of drugs with the football team that I played with. So unfortunately, I had to leave them behind. But in the main, I had to find something else that really ignited my passion. And for me as well, that was then when I went to uni, decided to study to be a counsellor. So it's finding something that you really believe in. And I think with this podcast, it seems you've got something here, a great platform to be able to share. But for me, it was definitely, just thinking, what do I want from life? Not just to live each day, staying away from, my addictions. It was about using the support groups as a bridge to normal living as well, to then to improve relationships, etc. Because I think I shared with you last night that when I was 31, I was just out of rehab in my mum's box room, no relationship, job I didn't really enjoy, bankrupt, and a load of arrests against my name for drugs. And then all of a sudden just kept doing the next right thing. And then, sort of 10, 12 years on now. And I don't say this egotistically at all. I'm married, got my own home, own business, all by doing the next right thing. That's what I really found helped me immensely. So it's finding something that, you're really passionate about.
Yeah. So do you know when you say that whole, like, do the next right thing, do the next right thing? I think that's definitely something that I am not great at generally. Not that I don't do the next right thing, but it's the fact that my brain always thinks, and maybe I've read obviously lots of things and tried to understand lots of things around how my brain works and how I was able to become addicted. And my brain always thinks not just the next step, but maybe the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just constantly going to the next step. And I'm finding I'm having to really slow my brain down, because whilst I think I overcame my addiction, and I am really in a good place with that, like genuinely, that doesn't give me any sort of trouble at all, and I'm very grateful for that. But it's that next part of my life of just not trying to get carried away with things and just trying to think, okay, just if I like playing football, I should play football. If I like running, I should run. If I'm drinking alcohol on the weekend and then I'm waking up the next day with beer regret, or I'm waking up on the Monday morning thinking, bloody hell, I feel like I haven't been away from work because all I've done is work, go out on the drink, work. It's just trying to find and build those sort of habits in my life that make me feel in control and make me think, actually, I'm not a struggling addict. I am someone who's now got a happy, healthy life. And I think that's probably where my mentality is at the minute.
Yeah. I think it's about looking where you want to be, in say 4 or 5 years' time, and then work backwards from there. Try and look at what building blocks do I need to put in place. So, for example, I always thought I'd love to be a therapist. Even when I was in rehab, I thought, this is it. I'd love to do it. So then I thought, what do I need to do next? Then it was a certificate of counselling course. Then I did that. Then it was on to do a bit of a placement. Then it was on to do a degree. And then before I know it, now I'm doing a PhD in addiction. And it just started with that first step into college to do a certificate of counselling degree. And it's always, I find, working backwards from a goal and then slowly putting it in place, those small steps, because it can be quite, really, seeing friends who are getting married and, happy, settled down, all the picture perfect lifestyles on, social media. It's, it's about really, just stripping it back, because all that will come if you just keep doing that next right thing and keep finding things that you enjoy, because you're not defined by your addiction. It's a bridge to live normally. That's the key. The work you've done is, don't be defined as, an addict, essentially. Go and chase those dreams, which you can, from your story, if you manage to get through that, no doubt you'll be able to achieve what you want. It's just about finding what you want, because you shared something that was quite poignant in last week. I remember once sitting in a AA meeting, thinking, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what to do, what I want to do. I had no clue who I was, and that was scary. I was, 30 at the time, and that's why it's your story. Just last night, I felt it viscerally last night when you shared that, and yeah, it stuck with me. So the takeaway really is just try and find something that you believe in, and then put in those small steps to achieve it.
Yeah.
Nathan, I just wanted to ask you, you're talking about long distance running being something that helped you. How was your relationship with fitness before all of that? Like with the drinking and...
Yeah, it was. I've always played football, a bit like yourselves. Here you were all talking that you played a lot of football, played all that growing up, and then I've always been naturally fit. I think that's why I took so much drugs. I was naturally that I didn't pass out or overdose because my fitness was quite good anyway. And I've always been good at long distance running, and I just thought I want to just go into it, and then now I run marathons and just do it. So so then set myself a goal of running under sub-3 marathon, trained hard, did that. There's just that addictive nature. It's not with a degree. I didn't do a master's. I skipped and went to do a PhD. I suppose it's just that that drive again, that to find something you enjoy, but then really, just throw yourself into it. So in short, I've always enjoyed fitness, and it was just something that helps so much. You hear a lot of people talk about running, how much it helps mental health. And for me, that, along with my support groups, were the number one in early recovery. Most definitely. Really was so helpful.
Yeah. I was going to say, we've just talked about that. Sorry, Lewis, mate. Just quickly follow on from that. We were just talking about that before, where Lewis was saying he was feeling a little bit down recently, and he was saying about the things that he stopped doing. He started drinking again, started going out the weekend, stopped exercising, he's been injured, so hasn't really been playing football, and it's all them sort of things that when you are feeling down, fitness is a major thing. Just getting up and getting out, and how good you feel, even if you just go to the gym for 30 minutes, how good you feel afterwards. Sort of hits a reset on that as well. So I think it does massively help.
It does, because if you're not playing your sport, then you go out on the piss. Next day you eat shit all day, and then it's harder than to. You're just getting that downward spiral, and then it's all these old negative habits come back in, and I found that key for me, because if I've got my exercise down, then I'm usually good.
How do you find it if there's ever a time when you're feeling a bit low and for whatever reason you can't exercise?
I get really ratty. My wife always says she knows when I've not been able to run, so it's difficult. But then I'll just maybe go for a walk and clear my head, or I will try to do something in fresh air, get out in nature. If it just means I can't play football or you can't run, just get out for a walk if I can. Just that's the key.
When I look at, so last week's episode came on the back of a few things happening in my life, most notably falling out with someone, and I generally don't fall out with people. I can't be asked with any arguments, can't be asked with any confrontation. I'd rather just not talk and you're not part of my life sort of thing and move on than get into any sort of argument like that. But it came about mainly because I don't think I was dealing with the things going on in my head. So basically for the 3 weeks before, or 3.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks of the 3.5 weeks, I was pretty much just in bed. I had the flu. I was injured from football, so I couldn't play football. So I came back from the flu, tried running, pulled my groin, couldn't play football. And I just found I was massively in my own head. And if I reflect on this period of time, it's the big, and I was just staying in the house or staying in my room or going out on the drink instead of on the weekends, instead of just taking the time to actually step back and go, there's things going on in your head. The pressure's building up, and instead of going, do something about that, I just almost pushed my problems to the side and thought alcohol was the answer, which it obviously never, ever, ever is. So I'm interested on. So you get a bit ratty. And your wife knows that you're down, but have you had an injury through going through this period where you couldn't exercise, and how did you try and cope with it?
Yeah, I've had quite several, especially when you get over 40, tend to pick injuries up quite frequently. But yeah, I just found that exactly what you did. But I think my job helps me though as well, because as well as the one-to-one therapy, I run groups for people struggling with sex and porn addiction, do that twice a week. So, and I do still see clients. So I've got a couple I see for free as well, just so it helps me give something back rather than just take. So I think I found that my job helps me immensely when I'm struggling. But like I say, if I can't run, I'll just get out for a walk. I'll just do something which is going to get me out of the house. Because if I don't go out the house, I might, have something rubbish for breakfast, then McDonald's for lunch. And slowly you're on that track, aren't you? And you just feel like shit and you just don't want to do anything. So the key for me would be just to get out in nature, just go for a walk. That's what works for me.
And is that a daily thing? No matter what, every day you make sure you get out for a period of time. Yeah.
Got to do some form of exercise. 100% for me. Key.
There was another thing you said. So you mentioned and you touched on it, and one of our someone who commented last week actually said something fairly similar. So you mentioned how your addiction or the addictive part of your brain helped you like get through your college, get through your uni. Instead of doing a master's, you've gone straight onto a PhD because you can almost use that obsessive, because that's what it is. It's that compulsive, obsessive thought to be really driven, really determined, really focused, because that's what it empowers you to do. There's a yin and yang with an addictive type brain, or because I can be really hyper focused, switched on, and into something, and if I really want to do something, no one's going to stop me doing it. But then there's the other side, isn't it? Because there's cruxes that can pull you in.
Of course.
So one of my friends commented last week on the podcast, and he's a really good runner, like way better runner than me and Dean, regrettably. And he talked about how like that generally from what he does and stuff, I presume it's around the fact that it helps him with his running and like be really like committed and determined and focused. So is there a way that people with an addictive mind or previously having addiction can almost harness the power of that? Is there a way to go from I'm addicted to substance or poor behavior to I can empower this in the right direction?
100%. What I also attribute it to is that I don't think I've shared this before. I've had OCD since I was a kid, since I was about 6 or 7. Yeah, horrendous. I've been on medication for years. So it's that. So it's more, I would say, it's that obsessive part of me that I can obsess over things which used to debilitate me. However, now it is that obsessive drive. But addiction, that OCD thinking are very similar when you're in that frame of mind. When you feel that you're in that, especially you, Lewis, when you're in that trance-like state, when you're on the phone, you're gambling, and you feel it's half an hour, but 5 hours have gone.
100%. But
in a nutshell, 100% it can be harnessed, because you hear a lot about successful people. Many of them have been through a lot of people have been through some form of addiction, but then they've channeled it the right way. So it can certainly be channeled for good. 100% believe that.
Yeah. Dean, so we haven't really spoke about your experience with addiction. I don't know if you have experienced anything with addiction. Is there anything that you've ever struggled with?
I just get addicted to things really intensely. It could be anything, going out on the drink, exercising, whatever it is. Like I'm all in on something for a short period of time, and then something just happens and I just forget about that for a while. That's probably one more me. Like I love drinking and stuff, like, as you know, like Lewis, I like to go out and drink now and again, but then I'll have months where I just don't bother going out on the drink. Games and stuff, like I'll be banging into my game, like same thing, I'll think it's 30 minutes, it's 5 hours later, and then I'll have months of that, and then I just stop playing for one reason or another. I think it's probably we think we've both got ADHD, don't we? So I don't know if it's a bit like that where you get hyper intense on one thing and then another. But that's probably the only thing that only sort of addictions that I have, really.
Is there ever a time where you're concerned about your behavior towards something, and how do you manage it?
I do, like, even like when I play my game and that, like, it was affecting my relationship for a while. But then I went through a period where I deleted the game I was fine, and then I found myself with a bit more spare time when the missus was away, so I downloaded it again and then I was playing it, and then now I'm finding myself on it. But I just feel like I manage it now, like, more. Like, something happens with me where I'll be all in on something, and then I'll just literally forget that I was even doing that, and then a couple of weeks later I'll be like, oh, I haven't done that in ages, and then I'll do that again. But that's like sort of like probably the limits of my addictive. Like, even when we're running, I'll go running for weeks on end, and then all of a sudden, probably my biggest addiction is football. Watching football, playing football, talking about football, being the football chat non-stop. Food, yeah. Food as well, actually, yeah, 100%. Yeah, food's a big one for me. It always has been. I just love food. I don't think that'll ever be not a thing for me. I think once I stop playing football, I don't think I'll have a reason to not get fat again. Like, I just love to eat food, but I am a lot more conscious these days about eating healthier foods and stuff, especially with this whole like podcast generation where you're listening to self-help things and stuff like that. So I am a lot more thoughtful on what I eat and stuff compared to what I used to be. But I can easily, like, that last Monday I went out after the day after we'd been on the drink, and I just put like 5,000 calories away like it was nothing, like just straight away. But I don't think I'll ever get over that.
No, I think that the difference is what you describe your behaviour, Dean, where you'll get to the cliff edge and come back, where Lewis and we're straight over. That's the difference, the ability you've got. I suppose in a way that choice where you can then decide, where people like again who suffer with addiction straight over that cliff. That's how I'd like it to.
Is there a reason why some people can and some people can't?
That's the big question. But I think it's down to so many different variables. The brain changes, early life experiences, the way the addiction affects the brain. There's so many different genetics as well. It's another that there is no one. They haven't found a molecule, so let's put it that way, which says that if you have this, you'll be addicted. There's so many different variables to it.
Variables, yeah. Do you know, there was one thing I covered last week, and I found it really interesting when I became, well, once I was actually in like the end of my addiction, but as in like I'd spoken to people that I had an addiction, and just before starting treatment around, it doesn't matter your background, your experience, your knowledge, your values, anything, your social life, your upbringing, like anyone can be addicted. And I think that would be that's the biggest thing I ever took away from it, because for the months that I was really suffering with my addiction, like, you do walk around like you're the worst person in the world, don't you? Like, even though when you're doing whatever your crux is, or if I was gambling, but times of that I didn't feel like the worst person in the world, because I felt like I had an element of control. And I don't know if that was the same with you and alcohol and drugs, where when you're doing it, you didn't feel addicted because you were doing what you enjoy to do, versus feeling like you'd lost control.
That's a great point. It's the different people I see on a weekly basis varies completely. They could be working sort of high-end jobs. They could just be, run-of-the-mill day-to-day people. Some people have had a good background, some people who haven't. It just does not discriminate. It really doesn't. Where I always assumed addicts was the homeless man on a park bench with a brown paper bottle drinking. But when I went into rehab, I saw the different people there and just thought, oh, they just seem normal. And it's it does not discriminate. But shame, that's a huge driver. And what I noticed in your share, correct me if I'm wrong, last week, when you began, you looked quite nervous, anxious. And by the end of it, when you had, Dean and the other chap, Steve, James, sorry, he was on it. It looked like it had lifted, that shame, that nervousness because again, shame can't survive with empathy, and they just didn't judge you. They were there, so that is the sort of the power of sharing, isn't it? To, people got off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's
massively true. And I think, like, I said this week that I think, so I counted it about 2:00 today, and I've received a few since, but I would say I've received about 120 messages, for argument's sake, from people saying, half of them say well done, like just a well done message, really proud of you, you did amazing, I would never have known, we were friends all that time, you kept it hidden so well. There was all of those messages, and it's so lovely to hear. It's also very overwhelming receiving that many messages, I have to be honest, because I also talked about the fact I have a little bit of anxiety, so when I have that many, I'm like, oh shit. And I'm also really bad at replying to people, so like it was one of them where I was getting all the messages and I was like, oh, thank you so much, I'm so grateful, but I really can't deal with all of those messages.
100 of the same conversations, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was, yeah. But then, there was 60 was that one. Then there was about another 30 of friends who some I'd played football with. One of them actually is a footballer. So he's a footballer. He's not Premier League or anything, but he's a footballer who is struggling with gambling. There's about half were struggling with gambling and whatever. They have issues around not knowing where to turn. They feel like the worst person in the world. Even ones that they're not saying that it's out of control, but they're not in control. And I think there's that little window where it goes from a hobby to something where it's becoming something you're having to do, but you're not losing thousands of pounds or hundreds of pounds all the time, but it's becoming compulsive. And then there's the I have no control part. So it was interesting how many people are in that stage and not feeling like they have anywhere to turn and what to do. But then there was the other, say 30-ish, 20, 30, whatever, of people who just generally struggle with like suicidal thoughts, maybe other forms of addiction, alcohol. Cocaine was quite a big one, actually. Cocaine's so prevalent, especially around, it could be everywhere, but I can only speak for us 31, living in Newcastle. I know tens of people who take cocaine. It's so readily available, and it's terrifying that that's become a substance that people have to use. They can't just go out and have a few beers with their mates anymore. They have to think, oh, I need to have cocaine to make my night better or whatever. So it was really interesting seeing and hearing from so many people. Again, some people I went to primary school with, and I received some honestly truly lovely messages from people, what a lovely person I am and all those things. And it's nice once you share, and I'm saying this story for people, not because I want people to think I'm great, because I want people to realize if you share, people will give you the same response, that it's good to talk, it's good to open up, like take confidence from that. People are there to support you. You don't have to do it on a podcast, I have to say, but you can just speak to your friends and family, because I actually think that is something that I wish I'd spoken to more people before doing the podcast, because it was really beneficial. There was so when I say some of the other issues that people were struggling with, I know that starts to delve into more of your work, because yours isn't specifically just gambling. You, like you say before, it's porn, sex addiction.
My favorite topic.
Exactly, yeah. So it'd be interesting to talk more about that work and what you do, because I think that's super interesting and something that isn't really spoken about enough, I don't think.
Not at all. And I always like to caveat this with, I'm not against porn. I'm not against people who use webcams or whatever they do in their lives. If it's not causing them a problem, then crack on, literally. However, when it comes to
literally
the amount of people who we're seeing at the moment, myself and other sex addiction therapists are now off the charts, people struggling, pornography. I was working with a chap the other day who spent 50 grand on webcam girls. Then you've got this sex workers, people use, a lot of men now using trans sex workers. The different behaviors, virtual reality sex is another one. Have you came across financial domination before? Have you ever heard of?
No, what is it?
where men pay women to humiliate them, shame them, abuse them. The kink is the sending the money and being controlled by a woman. So I had one chap who'd spent over 100 grand just paying money to be abused. Wow. And it all comes back in the main to trauma. They're replaying form of traumatic relationship. But this addiction, it's the research as well is about 10 years behind what we're seeing in clinical practice. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, it's deemed as a compulsive sexual behavior disorder. So it's more not an addiction, they say, though the medical people. However, you only have to look. You only have to look at the research with porn, especially the escalation from people who go from vanilla porn, hardcore, then they go to trans, then they go to bestiality, then they go to like barely legal, but then some cross over then into child porn. Pedophilia. Yeah, they're not pedophiles. However, they're so desensitized to what they're watching, they're then veering over. And again, dozens and dozens of men have contacted me to say they've had the knock at the door from the police because they found they've been on some child porn. You know, job goes, families goes because the social services get involved, lose the job. It's devastating, the impact this has on people. And, you know, and then you're looking at the things that people do suffer with erectile dysfunction because essentially they are training themselves to be aroused under certain conditions, watching other people have sex, you know, at home, being a voyeur on a laptop. So when it comes to the real women, it's as if they're training for the wrong sport. They're watching other people have sex and they can't get aroused by real women because how can a real person compete with all the fake noises, the fake bodies? It's all just supernormal stimuli, they call it. So it's awful. The people who we're seeing now, the average age people first watch it, you're looking 9 or 10. And that is quite, 9 or 10 estimate. And I think maybe even slightly lower. And, you know, at 9 or 10, when I was a lad, it used to be just magazines. You know, someone might have
find one in the bush.
But these days, because they're growing up, these youngsters with high-speed internet, they can watch it. You know, well-meaning parents give them smartphones. They're watching all sorts of material. And parents always assume it's not my kid watching it. If they've got a smartphone, they'll be watching it. Put it that way. So it's just that accessibility, and on the developing brain as well. It can be devastating. And I think the work I do is just about making it what's the word I'm looking for? Help people make an informed choice. That we know the dangers of drinking, we know the dangers of smoking, gambling, drugs, but no one mentions porn ever.
No,
nobody does, because why? People would rather run naked through the street than talk about their porn use. And it's go on, Lewis.
No, I think it's a really interesting point, and there's a few things my brain's going like. Obviously, as we've discussed,
I'll slow down a bit.
No, so like there was one thing you said about it like escalates from one to the next to the next to the next as the kink gets worse and worse or develops or whatever. But when you think of that, that's just an addict's brain, and I'll describe it. So you start with gambling, for example. I described my story. I started off doing £5 bets, then £20 bets, then £100 bets, then £1,000 bets. Like your brain searches for that dopamine hit, and that £5. Once you become addicted, just putting £5 bets on did nothing for my brain because there wasn't enough risk, there wasn't enough adrenaline, there wasn't enough of a thrill, because that's what your brain chases. It's the same when with an alcoholic. They start off drinking and they might go out with their mates on a weekend, but then they start drinking more and more and more every day. Instead of just lager, it's spirits, and then it's not just alcohol, it's maybe some other drugs, because they're just chasing that path of dopamine hit, get that big kick. So I think it's really interesting. The one thing you did say, which made me go, oh, that's a really like almost took me back a little bit, is where you said that the scientific community aren't really aren't super accepting of porn addiction, and that because they think it's as much like a sexual preference.
Yeah.
And I don't know when you said it, I thought it was more sexual preference, but actually, when you say it, if the pathway to addiction is fairly linear, it start off small. Your brain craves, tells you what to do, compulsive thoughts, obsessive thoughts, up a chain. Then the principle is the same, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. Because especially with pornography use, with drinking, your body will reach a limit, then you're going to black out. Take drugs, overdose, people do, don't they? Gambling, as you fortunately know, you lose your money and you can't do it. With porn, you can sit at your TV or your laptop and watch it 24 hours a day, and there's no limit to consumption. And that means then the brain can have high levels of dopamine, in your brain, such high levels. And we know that it makes dopamine consolidated networks in the brain, and it just gets these neural pathways entrenched, and then addiction often ensues.
So when you say that, do you mean that the brain becomes less stimulated by what it's seeing?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, then you become less interested in other things. So you need to see gang rape porn to get, because you can't just watch vanilla stuff anymore. And you certainly won't get aroused if you go out for a drink with somebody or, or for a coffee or what have you. So it's the brain then. There's the main changes in addiction that with the brain, you've got sensitization, which is when, I'll speak from a porn addict's point of view, they may have a house for the night free. Partner goes out, look at the laptop, and the brain lights up instantly. Could be the same for a gambling addict who looks at his phone, looks at the app, and the brain's going. And then it sends sort of down to the brain. It releases dopamine. And then over time, the nucleus accumbens, which is the reward center of the brain, that then becomes desensitized. So you need more for the same effect. And then the prefrontal cortex as well at the front of the brain becomes weakened, or it's called hypofrontality condition, which affects impulse control and executive functioning. So many men will say, I can't believe I did it because I should have gone to pick my daughter up from school, but I went to see a sex worker, or I got caught watching porn at work. And that's because in the brain, the dopamine, the different chemicals, it overwhelms the front part of the brain, which is involved in decision making, and then it goes offline. So then it's that animal part of the human kicks in, and I want it now, and until I orgasm. Then as soon as it finishes, it's like, oh my god, what have I done? And then this part of the brain's back online. So it's the neuroscience behind it. There's a book called Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson, amazing book. And he really goes in detail on that. I probably need about an hour to really go through it all. But that's the main sort of change is the sensitization in the brain to lay down the pathways. Then it becomes desensitized. And then because of this constant overwhelm, it reduces people's impulses as well. Or we become more compulsive, sorry.
Yeah. Is there a way to strengthen it? Is it just by removing yourself from it and your brain naturally starts to build up resilience?
Well, interesting. First of all, the research shows that once people abstain just from watching the pornography, the brain will return to its original state within about 3 to 6 months. But as long as 9 months for people who've grown up with it. So if you're a teenager who's grown up watching it, then it could take longer. But there's something I use. So I've developed a new model of treatment for sex addiction. So it's an integrative model for treating sex addiction. And there's an exercise that I use with clients. It's called attention training. So it's a 12-minute exercise. So it's an auditory exercise that we do. So it's first 5 minutes, you'll be listening to different sounds in nature, such as the wind, the rain, etc. Then the next 5 minutes, it's the same sounds, but quicker. And the last 2 minutes, it's listening to all the sounds at the same time. And what that does, it increases attention. It increases psychological flexibility. So again, it's helping people, I'm finding through my own research, deal with cravings, deal with their inattention, because they're training their brain to become more attentional. And it's very, very effective. I'm happy I could share the the exercise that I use. And there's research it's used in metacognitive therapy. So there's research which shows it helps with anxiety, helps with depression, but I found it helps with cravings, but because you're training your brain to switch your attention from one thing to the next. And it's amazing how it works. So that forms a real bedrock of the treatment that my model developed. So it's treating the addiction, but also, if needed, the trauma and the attachment as well. But in short, that works wonders that I found. You practice 12 minutes a day, and you just pop your headphones in, it gives you a video, and you just keep your eyes open and just listen to the voice. And you can literally, I'm speaking to a client, you can feel your brain working. It's amazing how it works. And if you can do it for once a day for a month, the what's the word I'm looking for? The results, they're brilliant. But if you do suffer from clinical ADHD, I work with clients to slowly integrate it. So I'll tell them to go outside and just listen to some different sounds, just to maybe for 3 or 4 minutes, because it can get quite overwhelming for people who've got, especially clinical ADHD. But for those who don't have that, it's working wonders, really is.
How do you so the challenge today in today's world with porn, for example, is it's so readily available. So like you say, a 9-year-old can get it. And I try to limit myself on social media generally, to be honest. I don't have Instagram. I use Twitter for usually looking at reaction of Arsenal or Liverpool getting beat as per your LinkedIn status over the weekend. Yeah, I like to see that sort of thing and watching the fans kick off. But what happens if you actually go into the comments on anything, on especially X, so Twitter, and Instagram, what I used to see anyway, again, I don't have it, is just naked girls. It's OnlyFans. It's all of that content constantly, where it's the same for me being a gambling addict, where I love football and everything around football is gambling. The whole football industry is built around gambling now. They're all propped up by their sponsorship and money. If not on the front of their shirts, but the TV channels are taking their money through adverts, at breaks and stuff. But social media plays such a big part in today's world. Do you feel more needs to be done in education to teach children, or even the social media platforms to create the ability to remove sexual content?
Yeah, I think there does need to be, because it's just, again, in something such as, an environment where you're just talking about completely different related content, things like that get dropped in, but it's just completely unregulated, isn't it? And,
especially X now.
It's really bad, isn't it? That's what triggers me, is being on X. You go on X and you're looking at the football thing, and you scroll down, and then that's it, game over. Yeah,
so but I think when you're looking at, you were talking about football with gambling, then they'll have the cursory gamble aware in the top right corner. Stop the reference. It's so
patronizing,
condescending.
Actually.
Yeah, it really is.
It is. It's like, we're trying to make you spend all of your money as quickly as possible, because we're advertising on your favorite event. Yeah. But just be aware. Just be aware.
But there's no porn stop.
No.
There's no porn stop, is there?
No. But there's a company I reached out to who go into schools, discussing knife crime, gun crime, etc. Didn't even reply to me when I offered to go in and maybe do a bit of education.
Wow.
I think. Do you think it's what you said before, where drugs and alcohol have been around for a long time? The sort of the porn industry. I mean, like you said, when we were young, it was nigh on. It was just magazines, wasn't it? Yeah. You'd find one in a bush, you would share it between you and your mates, and that would be it. But I think like now, you can see more naked girls in one video than most people for their entire lives ever seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like 100 years ago. We can see more people in an hour naked than they ever seen in their lifetime. It was something like that. I've seen it, which is terrifying. But it's also there's the other side of it. It's the impact on the people who are doing the pornography. Like they are chasing money. OnlyFans. There's so many people doing OnlyFans. It's like crazy, and I just feel in 10 years, 5 years time, a year's time, 10 years time, whatever it becomes, what are they all going to be doing?
Because it's so easy for them, though, isn't it? So easy for them to make money. Like you've got to think, there's probably these people that have OnlyFans accounts probably got like 3 subscribers making £15 a month or something. Like, but I think it's the answer
What do you lose? But what do you lose for that? In your own self-worth, in your own valuing yourself. Like we're doing a health podcast. We're talking about how we feel and all those sorts of things. How to live a fulfilled life, happy life, content life. I would be tempted to try and get someone on actually to talk.
Thinking that,
to understand. But the thing is that none of them say they're unsuccessful. That's the reality. We'd have to get someone who's done the.
There'll be years to come, won't it?
Yeah. And I think something you said, Lewis, about really the origins of addiction. So there's, especially when we're looking at, again, sort of sex addiction, but this can be applied to all addiction. So we've got more classic addiction, which is rooted in relational trauma, which could be physical abuse, sexual abuse. It could be neglect, humiliation. So that, or attachment disorder as well, which again could be caused if parents divorce. That's another one. So that tends to be the classic addiction route that we see. But these days now, we're seeing a lot of more contemporary addictions because of the things such as porn, online gambling, video games, children who don't have necessarily any trauma in the background, because this material they're watching so potent. These Call of Duty games, and they're just hijacking people's brains, the reward center. So there doesn't need to be any trauma as before at the internet, really, where it's sort of taken off. So we're seeing many more presentations now with contemporary addiction based upon the type of material they're viewing, either video games or the porn or the gambling. Is just so powerful, as you know yourself, Lewis, to your detriment on the roulette. It's draws you in.
Massively. I think we spoke about me and Dean speak about this all of the time, because obviously I'm not going to sing his praises too much, but this year he's been a huge help, and that's the best praise he's going to get out of me ever publicly. We speak about like reels, shorts, stories, how they are short 30-second clips, dopamine hit, and then you want the next one, short video, next hit, short, next video. And when I think about
but they skip now, don't they? They skip them so that you don't get them every single hit, because if you get them every single hit, you get bored of them. So that you get a video you don't like, but that's the video that you want. So it's they figured everything out to try and keep you as entertained as possible, to try and keep you on there as long as possible, to make as much money from ad revenue and stuff like that.
No, absolutely. But when I think about that 10, 15, 20, 30-second cycle, that is all the roulette was. All the roulette was. So you'd go on a fast spin, 20 seconds, and you could do 3 spins in a minute. And it was just the next. Just all I was going for was the next. And to Dean's point, I wasn't winning every time, but you would win, lose, and it was enough to keep my brain triggered. And the principle of a story or a short or whatever is exactly the same as what roulette was doing to my brain. So I was very conscious to delete Instagram, because I found myself scrolling through Instagram, because actually it was giving me. I'd be sat there, and 10 minutes later I'm still there. An hour later, I'm still there. 2 hours later, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And my brain was replacing that dopamine hit with that attention thing. Now, I struggle with this as a podcast. I actually work in marketing as well as my day job. So and I'm not saying I don't work in that side of it. I have to be honest. Don't shoot me. And I find it quite conflicting trying to grow a podcast and really make it successful and have the social impact that I want this to have, without playing that game. Like, I feel like we have to play that game because that's the way now society works. And that's the only way we're going to grab attention is by actually playing into that cycle of people just want short, snappy bits of information. And they don't really like, very few people watch long form content, an hour, hour and a half. But as soon as we clip this up into 10 60-second clips, all of them will get way more views than the total video. So what do we do? Do we play the game because that's how humans are, or are humans only like that because the game has changed how humans are?
We've got to change we've got to do what you've got to do, haven't you? At the end of the day, like, it's the way of the world. It's the way it's going to be, and it's not going to change for a very long time. If anything, it's going to get worse. We're going to be more and more online, especially with like this VR and the
Meta.
Apple Vision and Meta and all that. You watch these videos like them films like Ready Player One and stuff where people are like literally living inside of a virtual reality, and probably maybe one day in the future it'll go towards that. But I think just got to do what you got to do, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think with this concept, what you're doing as well, it's for a good cause. You're not, you're trying to, with what you shared last week, Lewis. If that inspires one person to come forward, just one,
it's worth it
every day of the week.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's not like you are working for, these programs like Coco Melon that they're designed to make kids addicted to them.
God.
And My Little and used to what they just become like zombies. And so it's, you're doing it for the right reason. So but there are marketing sort of ploys which are all about getting people hooked, which is the modern day, isn't it? Yeah.
No, Lou doesn't know all about. Just get me out of that hole that I've just dug myself.
Lou's bad at his job then because he doesn't know about it.
Shit.
Which is it, Lou?
I don't know the answer. No, don't sack him. Please don't sack him. It's interesting you mentioned Coco Melon because I have a son and I am so passionate about him not watching TV for long periods of time. If any at all, like as you say, you watch your young children staring at a TV and they're not there anymore. And there was a period of time when we let him watch a little bit more TV than we probably had ever planned to, not by choice, but just by changing him on the living room floor, for example. And he's in the living room. And there was a couple of times where he was just fixated and would almost start crying without it. And that's an early sign of addiction. It's an early sign of, exactly, I want that, I want that, I want that. And he wasn't even one. And I promise you, we did not let him in front of the telly much at all. So what's really worrying is that the parents out there, because being on holidays and stuff, and you see parents just sticking an iPad in front of their kid, and the kid's 4 years old, 3 years old, and the parents are just chatting, and the kid's just sat there in front of an iPad
like this,
like that far away from the screen, and you just
headphones
on, chicken nuggets.
Exactly. What is that kid's life going to be? Because their brain is just going to be programmed to want dopamine all of the time.
Yeah.
There's the other side of that, like, because I was talking about this taxi driver, I was saying now how good footballers are this day and age, right? As an example, like kids are getting better and better because they've got access to the information on likes of YouTube and stuff like that. So like it's finding the balance, I think, like of letting them watch, educational things to make themselves better in life, that rather than just sitting watching cartoons and stuff. So I think the hard thing, because if you take your kid offline, by the time he's 13, 14, 15, he's going to be unpopular. He's going to be out of it. All the other kids
will also not be able to get another job and get a proper job.
Yeah, so it's finding that balance, isn't it, of getting them to move on with the world, but also not to get addicted to screens.
I think it's just the society that at the moment, isn't it? That instant gratification. I think that somebody in the US calls the smartphone the modern day hypodermic needle, just wiring dopamine into us.
Yeah,
all of the time.
Yeah.
Do you ever get that? Let's all do this test. Actually, do you know how we can go on your phone and how much you've used your phone?
Screen time.
Screen time. Let's all do that test. Where is it?
Just pull
Screen
down
time.
and write screen. Type screen time, and mine's only from today.
Mine's only from today.
But
you ran today. You ran for like 3 hours, 2 hours. So you're
but
gonna be.
No, but mine's like 5 hours 48 because I had Strava on it. Strava doing the directions. So like Strava's 2 hours 21.
What's yours, Nathan?
Let's have a look. 1 hour.
Mine's so bad because I had music on my phone all day.
No, that doesn't count. That doesn't do screen time.
No, it does because I had it on YouTube.
It was 10 hours Premium?
I just had it. It was 10 hours 13. I need to track that because
get YouTube Premium, mate.
My usage is all YouTube just from having a playlist on. So I need to do. We're going to do that test again in a couple of weeks.
No, we'll do it on Sunday. We'll take a screenshot and we'll upload it.
Okay, right. Brilliant. Challenges. I was also doing some work on the podcast earlier as well on my phone this morning.
What's your notifications, Lewis?
Your what? Sorry.
Oh, you can actually change it. You can go last week. So if you scroll down a little bit, as you scroll down, it gives you the option to go last week and then the week before. Last week my average is like 9 hours 39. That's so bad, isn't it?
Screen distance. Seal app website activity. I don't know. Oh, there we go. 6 hours 50 last week.
Mine's a new phone, so it doesn't go back that far. No, but yeah.
Well played.
Yeah. Mine's new too. Actually, that 9 hours I just made up.
Brilliant.
Yeah. My question to the listeners as well: go and check your phone, check your screen time. I think it's a good exercise just to check yourself on how much are you wasting on your life sat in front of your phone. Even 6 hours 50 makes me feel sick. I'm going to be honest. That is not a nice or healthy way to be living my life, staring at a piece of metal and some lights. I probably need to just start playing YouTube through my laptop or something so I can get a true reflection of it, because that makes me feel a little bit sick. But that was definitely a good exercise. Okay, so Nathan, I have a big topic that I definitely want to cover with you is your book. So you were very kind to give me a copy of your book.
Yes.
I haven't finished it, I have to be honest. I did find it really useful. Given the place where I am now mentally, I will finish it. But at the time, I didn't feel like... So I'd say about a third to halfway through.
Yep.
I would say I didn't feel like I needed it. Where right now, it's not about needing it. It's about just reinforcing, as it all describes. It gives you the theory of what it is and why, and which is super interesting. I think it's just then reinforcing that I am in a good place, and I think that would be it's always a good thing to reflect on where you're at. So I'd be really keen for you to tell people about it, because I actually think it's something where... So therapy is expensive. Counseling is expensive for people. There are ways to make it slightly cheaper. But what I would say is having a resource, and this is what this is. It's a tool for you to be able to understand and manage your brain as much as anything I found. I'm not going to do sales pitch because I could go and go. But tell us a little bit more about it, because I actually think today's world needs it.
Yeah, so I met a chap called Dr. Eddie Caparucci. I didn't meet him, actually. I read his book. He wrote a book and about inner child therapy and treating porn addiction. And I came across it, and I found I was plateauing a bit in my own recovery. So I was about 8 years in. I thought, I'm struggling a bit. I just felt that I wasn't getting what I wanted from meetings anymore. I just felt like I'd sort of flatlined. Read his book. Thought, this is it. This is brilliant. It really focuses on childhood trauma. It focuses on, well, especially in my case, parents got divorced, and I had such a deep attachment wound that I just felt abandoned. Came across his work, started using it then with my own clients, with drink, with drugs, gambling, And I contacted Eddie Caparucci, and I said to him, I'm using it with clients in the substance abuse field, just to let you know. And then he said, right, let's collaborate, let's do a book. And then hence where the books came from, where we've tailored it now to treat all addictions. But it all came from my own experience using that model, where I recall I was on the way to Manchester for the day with work. It was a lovely summer's day. I was sat on the train, families around me, young parents with children, just looked all really like the idyllic picture. And I just felt an overwhelming feeling of rejection, sadness, abandonment. I couldn't put my finger on it because wife was at work, daughter's at nursery, all's good. But what in that moment, seeing those happy families, it had just tapped into something that I'd not resolved, that deep wound from when my parents got divorced. And in Eddie's book, it talks about if you just sit and follow that feeling, it generally takes you back to a memory of childhood. And it took me back to a memory where I was sat on the stairs, looking down, seeing my dad walk out, mum arguing. And it was just from that moment, by sitting, it was all unconscious, by seeing happy families, it had something activated within me. But after I got those feelings of sadness, rejection, my addictive thoughts came back. Maybe when you get to Manchester, we can have a drink, we can go and get some drugs, we can, and I thought, why? Because that's what I used to regulate those unresolved wounds. So it was just my own experience with it as well. I thought, this is so powerful. And I've helped hundreds of people now using inner child work. And one of the main interventions or exercises we use with clients is I'll ask them to bring in some photos from childhood. So they'll bring in, say, 4 or 5 photos. And then I'll ask them a series of questions. First of all, how old are you? How are you feeling? Why are you feeling this way? And what can I do to help? And I ask them to answer the questions using their non-dominant hand, so using their weaker hand. So by using the non-dominant hand, it accesses the right brain where traumatic memories are stored. And it is some of the work that I've managed to achieve with clients using the inner child work. There was one client I was working with. He came to me, had a picture, him and his dad just talking. They looked like they were just happy. Asked him the question, how old are you? I think he said 7. How are you feeling? And then he just put happy. And then I said, why are you feeling that way? And then he just sort of broke down in front of me. His hand started, it was like childlike scrawl. And he just wrote, if I'm not happy, it makes dad angry. And in that moment, it brought back all these memories he'd suppressed of his abuse from his dad. So as you can imagine, it's very intense work. And it's that art of pendulation where you go to the trauma and away from it. And when I first came across the work, I thought I was going to change the world. I was using it with every client. One young lad said, can we just stop? It's too much. Great learning for me that's the only way we learn sometimes, making those mistakes. But I trained originally in cognitive behavior therapy. I can achieve more in one session of inner child therapy than 20 sessions of CBT because it uses this part of the brain, the right brain, where memory's stored. Because day to day, we're just using the left brain, that analytical, we rationalize things, and we don't ever just, a lot of us can cut off from our emotions, especially in addiction. We then use gambling, drinking, drugs to regulate our nervous system. So it revolutionized how I work. It's the book, as you know, it's a chapter by chapter, and there's a workbook as well. And it's, again, I finished with a chap today. We went through the book. We finished now, and he said that, a year ago I was suicidal, and if it wasn't for you, I'd have killed myself. And in that moment, I just thought, wow, that's why I do it. Love it.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Like, if there's anything someone could ever say to you, that's the most powerful thing. Like, you've saved someone's life. That's not all superheroes wear capes.
But it was just in that moment, we'd really went deep into the work with the inner child work, and it's not for everyone. So again, for the people who do have that classic addiction rooted in trauma or attachment disorders, it's brilliant. But if it's for the young person who's been hooked on the porn since he was 9 or 10, there's no trauma to treat, then generalized sort of CBT is enough, but it's all, again, I don't use a cookie cutter approach, hence the name of my model. It's an integrative approach because different people need different things at different times. So it's not a blanket approach, but it's proven a lot of nice emails as well from people who've read the book and now using it with clients. And it's really proud of it. Understanding Your Inner Child and Overcoming Addiction.
Perfect.
So it's a treatment manual and sort of workbook as well. So
we will do the whole resharing and stuff again, obviously, which is great. There was something that you said there. So you said around like trauma, then you said attachment theory. We talk about trauma quite a lot.
Yeah.
Within attachment theory, what does that mean for listeners who might not be aware what that is?
So attachment. So the first 3 years of a child's life, it's the most important phase sort of brain development. So you have to think it's all, non-verbal. It's, if we're looking at the infant and the caregiver, non-verbal, it is about attuning to your child, helping them learn to, interactively regulate so then they can begin to regulate their own emotions. So attachment theory is essentially, it's about helping the infant, firstly, develop that secure attachment. So then that they can see you as a trustworthy person, see that you're reliable, they can meet your needs. But unfortunately, some children, and it's not a dig at the parents, maybe they've had their upbringing's affected them. They don't have that ability to, offer that parenting style to help attune with their children. So then they develop an anxious attachment or an avoidant attachment, where, especially with avoidant attachment, we see clients who early on, they'll see their parents are quite distracted, they're not interested. So then they will go away and they'll lose themselves in video games, fantasy, porn. They will use things to auto-regulate their nervous system. So attachment theory, really, it's by a chap called John Bowlby. And there's a chap called Alan Shaw, he really influences my work. And it's, the science behind how humans regulate their emotions, essentially. It was all about that. And they say about there's a chap called Donald Winnicott spoke about the good enough mother to help the child develop properly. And we believe in therapy, we just need to be that good enough other, because the attachment style can change throughout the lifespan. So it shows how important, this one-to-one therapy is, to give the client what they never got.
And as people get older, if they don't address that attachment theory, and I think we all have it to certain degrees, to be fair, how can that massively impact how people then are with other people? As in, like, is it almost like they become like a hardened shell of themselves, or they're an extroverted version of themselves, whatever? Because am I right in thinking there's 4?
Yeah, there's 4 attachment styles. So we've got attachment theory covers everything, but then within that we've got secure attachment, which is you develop that through that attunement from parents. You know that you feel loved, you feel safe, you feel that you're not going to be rejected. And then that goes into adulthood. You have secure relationships. But if you don't get the secure attachment, say you have anxious, then you're very anxious. You could be, really codependent on your partner, impacts relationships massively. So you've got anxious attachment, and then avoidant attachment. I see this a lot with my client population. They won't allow people to get close to them because they don't know how to share their emotions. They don't know how to be emotionally vulnerable. And then they use sex as a way to, it's all about objects. They just see people to use them because they don't know how to get in touch with their feelings. And then we've got the disorganized, which fluctuates between sort of anger, sadness. So it could be anxious, avoidant. And that generally occurs if somebody's really severely traumatized, if there's been some form of abuse where they've really felt neglected as a child. So there's that disorganized attachment as well. So it can severely, and if you don't work on it, unfortunately, it does play out in ways that we relate to others, our own insecurities, our own limited core beliefs. So massively, and it can just stay if we never address it.
And are there ways that people can treat them and get to a place where maybe their view on the world, or I don't even know what it really is. So in terms of like, is it their personality? Is it just the way their brain processes things? Is there a way that people can tone that down?
Yeah, that would be relational psychotherapy. Again,
Okay.
learning or going through those experiences that have really impacted them in life, just having that person there to be able to speak to. And it's so important, just having somebody there who won't judge, who will sit with you in your pain and help you learn to regulate your nervous system. Yeah. It's amazing. The science behind it, Lewis, it's phenomenal.
I'm
it's so
definitely super interested in it. Yeah, I'm definitely super interested in it, because I think as humans, we're all connected emotionally. And I think the way to get onto a level with someone is to get onto an emotional level with them to truly build great relationships. And I think the more I can understand how people think and feel, the more likelihood we can deliver the change that we ultimately want to deliver as a podcast. Because actually, if our message is only reaching 2 out of the 4, because actually other people are switched off by what we're saying, because we're maybe not hitting their emotional needs, then there's no point doing this. So for us as a podcast, it's about us. It's not just about the guests, the listeners learning. I think for us, we all made almost a pact when we started this. We could go to university and study a course. We could, I don't know, go and volunteer at places and learn from people. But actually getting to sit and speak to people like yourself, who have years and years of experience, both lived and professionally, is hugely beneficial, because it means that not just us as podcast hosts, just us as people are able to be better people, because we understand more what people are going through. And I think if any listener takes anything from that, is take this, the fact that you can learn from experts on how people think, feel, operate, understand things. So then you can leave this episode and go, okay, well, X person that I've maybe clashed with a little bit, or our relationship's a bit has a bit of friction, or I love them, but I don't know how to express that I love them. Then take something away from this. And I'm not saying that this episode is going to give you all of the answers, but it'll give you a seed for you then to go away and take away and do that further bit of insight and knowledge. And I know you won't mind people reaching out to you, Nathan. People can reach out to Nathan and speak to him. And if you want to have further conversations with Nathan, obviously he runs his own clinic, so there's lots of conversations that you can have as well around some of these things, where what we're trying to do is ultimately bring experts for people to listen and learn, to find ways. Because I think last week what was really clear for me is we had a really poignant conversation around addiction and suicidal thoughts, and so many people are out there saying that they're struggling and don't know where to turn. And that's the saddest bit, because there is so many options out there for people.
There is. And I think you spoke about what could we do really in society, or the whole it needs a complete shake up, the addiction treatment field. If you're looking in terms of the NHS, they're just not equipped to handle it, unfortunately. They may offer you 6 sessions. That's it's from a good, I understand that they're well-meaning, but it's not enough to arrest an addiction, deal with underlying trauma, look at someone's attachment style, help them regulate the nervous system. There's just not enough time. And this is why I think the training that I run workshops for clinicians throughout sort of the UK and Europe, and I make it a point that I want to work with as many charities as possible. And there's a couple I work with in particular down in Eastbourne and in Brighton. If they've got any therapists who want to come on my workshops, they can just come free of charge. I'll just let them come on, because then if they can take anything away from these workshops, it'll hold them in good stead with the clients, and it'll have that positive knock-on effect. Because the amount of people who came to see me, that it could be a drug addict, gambling, sex addict, they go to the NHS and they get turned away because they don't know how to handle that client presentation. And it's sad, because people are dying. It's horrendous. Really is sad.
I'm going to actually talk about my story a little bit on that, actually, because I didn't talk about it last week, and I didn't because it was so insignificant in the actual story because I ended up getting help through a charity. You're right.
Mm.
I actually went to the NHS and I was given. Originally, I think I was supposed to speak to a doctor, and I didn't. Ended up speaking to someone who works in mental health, and it was general mental health. So they weren't a specialist in addiction or especially gambling addiction. It was just general mental health, and it was because I had suicidal thoughts at the time, and they were subsiding because I had probably come over that initial shit I've told people now.
Yeah.
The guilt was probably on the decline, so the suicidal thoughts weren't really there. But there was no offer to help with the gambling addiction. So I went there and it was, oh, so you're having suicidal thoughts. It was a checkbox, right? Just a checklist, essentially. Asked a few questions and there was some conversation, but I could tell it was a robust process of, we're going to start at 1 and we're going to finish at 10. And then I'm going to close the door and I'm going to speak to the next person. So I left there with them saying, me saying, I don't want any medication. I've never been on medication for anything in my life. Like I'll take paracetamol if I've got a really bad headache, but generally I don't take medication. I think most things, especially around my mind, I know what makes me feel good and what makes me feel bad. Exercising, talking, eating well, like seeing my friends, all like the good things in life, family, they make me be in a happy place. And when I have these moments of being really withdrawn and by myself and whatever, and I let life get on top of me, I know that's when I feel shit. So I left there, and because I didn't want medication for my suicidal thoughts, it was, well, then you're fine. And I was like, I'm actually really here because I'm struggling with addiction, not because the suicidal thoughts was the mountain peak. That was the hardest bit.
Not the cause.
But it actually, but it's not the cause, exactly. So if you want to deal with the outcome of he's not going to kill himself, great. Well, actually, I could have gambled that day or the next week, and I would have been back in that position. Because as you say, there isn't a robust treatment plan through the NHS for people with addiction.
They don't. And there was one chap I worked with, and he went there for porn addiction, and he told the therapist there that he couldn't stop watching incest pornography, didn't know how to handle it, just said they can't help him. Can you imagine the shame where this person's opened up about some things, and then he came to me and we went through his sexual history. And it's always important to ask people, especially if they're struggling with addiction now, what type of pornography they're addicted to. And in his case, he was sexually abused by his sister. So a lot of the time, people are replaying trauma. So in this client's case, he was trying to turn his trauma into a triumph. So he was choosing what video he wanted to watch. He could be in control. He was on his own. He was trying to get some form of, agency over his trauma and to relieve that psychological tension. He was trying to make sense of what happened to him by watching the very behavior that was, that he went through as a kid. But you won't know that if somebody went, they'd think, oh, he's a bit weird. Why is he watching that? Or another client of mine, he witnessed a gang rape in front of him when he was 10. Lo and behold, develops a fascination with gang rape pornography. Wouldn't speak about it for years because of the shame. But it's called repetition compulsion, where you're replaying this trauma to find a way to make sense of it. And this is why I think with sex and porn, it's a different beast to treat than drink, drugs. One, because we're biologically wired to be sexual. And being in recovery is not about not having sex, or it's about having a healthy sexuality. That's the key. So it really is. It's that addiction. They need so much training in that area, because I only know that because I trained under the best person in the UK, and I'm such a big believer in, if you find something you're good at, go and find someone who's better, because you're going to learn. And I'm like a sponge now. I work with a clinician in the USA. She's outstanding. And I can just keep learning and learning and learning. And I think that is, and I do feel for, just a bit off tangent, the people who go to the NHS, where it really is, it's replaying trauma a lot of the time, and they don't understand, and the shame. Imagine the shame of being turned away by a therapist when you've reached out for help. People go underground then, and then they...
Oh yeah, it goes the complete opposite way.
Turn, really. That's what
he doesn't want to be here anymore. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
heartbreaking, but it's needs to be root and branch change. But that costs so much money. I don't know. It seems like you say, Lewis, tick box exercise. If they do, end up, death by suicide, then at least we've covered our backsides.
Yeah, I was offered to do a group therapy on gambling, and it was a 6-week waiting list. So, and that was after waiting a week to go to my doctors, after saying I didn't want to be here anymore. So, you're talking 7 weeks from saying I am thinking of committing suicide every day. Where I went, and I was so lucky, honestly. I went to NECA, which is a Northeast addiction charity. I believe it's it does more than gambling, I'm sure. And I spoke about it on the episode last week. I was so lucky. I had a counsellor who just he just listened, and everything you've said today around really understanding the inner child, me as a person, values, all that sort of stuff. That's how we got to me overcoming my addiction to a point where it's in there at the back of my head. I know that I have those tendencies. I understand it. I know what it feels like when it's coming. I know how to suppress it. I know how to live with it. All those sorts of things. Well, I think if I had just taken some medication to make me feel less depressed and ticked that box, I would have gambled again, or I wouldn't be here.
Of course.
So, that's just not the right way of dealing with it.
It's not, because you've seen the power then of attunement, where in the room you don't even need to say anything. It's all non-verbal. The nod of the head, the eye contact, the way the words, the tone of voice, and that is why it's so important. That therapy then to then be able to develop that secure attachment that you develop with your therapist, where he may tell you that you can trust him, but you need to feel it. You've got to feel it viscerally. You can't just know it. You've got to feel it. And that is then, which you've been through, finding that therapist, then the brain starts to make those connections, which you didn't get in childhood. And then people learn to regulate their emotions. They don't need to use drink, drugs, gambling, or what have you. And it's not it's the amount of people who phone me and say, can you fix me in 6 sessions? And I'll say, how long have you been drinking or using? 20 years. No, I can't. And beware of people who also say, I can fix your addiction in 30, 60, 90 days. Bollocks. Because you can't stop an addiction. You can't change your attachment style, heal trauma in 90 days. Come on. Yeah. And I think now it's just to be, if people are looking for a therapist, look at their qualifications. Are they qualified? Have they gone through the accreditation process? Because there's many people who sometimes can moonlight as therapists, does more harm than good. And that's something that really annoys me, that, the hard work that therapists who go through to train hard and deliver a service. Yeah, it's these 30, honestly, 90-day programs that I just don't believe. It's just my opinion, of course. I might be wrong, but the research does show that it takes time.
Well, mine took a lot longer than 90 days. So I can speak from experience. And mine wasn't a 20-year addiction. So it could, because the first part to actually deal with it isn't really dealing with it. It's dealing with you and your beliefs and who you are, your inner child, all of those sorts of things, before you even really get into I think month 3 was when we were really starting to properly get into it.
Of course. Yeah. It takes time to develop that trust and, that relationship. And so, it does take time. But as you say, it's, that investment. And I always say to clients, it's an investment in your future. Somebody might say, well, that's expensive, but I'll say, how much are you spending on sex workers a week or a month? When you weigh it up, it's, and it's like it's a different kettle of fish.
There was something you said earlier, and it stuck in my head. So obviously now we talk about men and women's health. Yeah. So this is me with my prejudice here, and I think I might be right. Am I right in presuming the majority of your patients or clients will be men?
Yeah, the majority,
overwhelmingly.
Yeah, majority are heterosexual males, small percentage gay men. That's okay. and don't work with any females, and there's different theories behind that. It could be maybe, and I believe there are women who struggle with this out there.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the double standards that women suffer with sexual behavior anyway, where men are seen as like Lotharios and women are shamed. So they could be that way. People don't come forward. Maybe women who are struggling with this could be in the industry, OnlyFans or webcams, making money out of their addiction. Or it also, women tend to consume erotica different in form of books as well, rather than men are quite visual, where they'll watch porn. But yeah, there's a lot of sort of theories behind it, but predominantly it's it is males, yeah. So I think, but I do believe that women do struggle with it, but not seeing it in practice.
Yeah, because it's even like gambling addiction massively over indexes in men.
Yeah.
Alcohol addiction over indexes in men. Food addiction, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the stats on those sorts of things, but it feels like men generally, across the main ones anyway. I'm saying main ones like the bloody sticker collection, like the ones that are most spoken about. It seems to over-index in men, and I just kind of wonder why that would be. It just doesn't, unless there's a real biological.
What are the addictions the reverse? Like, what addictions do women have that are higher than men? Did any spring to mind?
I feel I might have to ask that.
I think in terms of my own practice, and even when I was, going to sort of the 12-step groups that I used to go to, there seemed to be quite an even split though of people. And I would say that, I do treat quite a lot of drug and alcohol clients. Half of them are women.
Okay.
Really?
So I think for me, I only see that disparity in porn and sex.
Right. Okay.
That's just from my clinical view, but I don't know what the research may say on that. But in my practice,
I don't know. Yeah, it's maybe because I'd never hear women really talk about it. We had an amazing guest on, Eddie Cobb, on 4 or 5 months ago, and she shared her story with addiction to drugs. I think she was drinking as well, and then it went drugs, and then ended up being on heroin.
Okay.
And she runs a clinic down south. Obviously, everything's down south to living in Newcastle, and she runs a clinic down there for people struggling with drug addiction, and it's amazing the work that she does. But she was the first person that I've ever really seen as a first female really talk about it. But it's really interesting, and I'm slightly going off topic here. Movies always portray in series that it's the woman who's addicted to drugs, heroin, becomes a prostitute, those types of things. Where in society, what I see, and it might be because I have more male friends and in more male environments, but I see more men that are struggling with things like alcohol and drugs.
Okay.
So maybe it's something that I need to go away and understand more of, but it doesn't feel like that representation is 50-50 from what I've seen. But again, my experience is not your experience by a mile.
Yeah. I think when I was in rehab as well, half a woman, half a man. So I think again, it's all our own experiences, isn't it? And I've been around that environment more, so I think maybe it's just what I've seen. Tends to be, but definitely with the sex and the porn, it's predominantly, or it is all men that I work with.
So I've just done a quick search. So women over-index on prescription medication, shopping addiction, food addiction, social media addiction, smoking, and eating disorders.
Okay.
Which some of them are probably they feel fairly stereotypical in the sense of what you see in movies and what you see in series. And again, it's not something. I'll be really honest to all listeners. I am not an expert in women's health at all yet, so maybe I never will be. So it's one of those where having these conversations is as much about trying to learn and understand as we go, as much so we can help versus just have the conversation.
Yeah.
Is there any of those that you support people with generally? Well, prescription medication, I imagine, because that's drugs.
That's a common one. So people that get hooked on tramadol, codeine, that's another one. Benzos, common. What were the other ones that you mentioned?
Shopping, food, social media, tobacco, eating.
Food, 100%. Food, really, people struggle with that. But I always find it funny with smoking, because there's no Smokers Anonymous, is there? There's nothing really, and it's one of the hardest addictions to kick. Doesn't seem to be.
There's not.
No, I always think that, but no, never worked with anyone with smoking addiction.
No. Well, I think
all the hypnotists are doing that one.
Yeah, could be.
That's it. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Why don't hypnotists work in the other stuff? It's like they're stuck in the smoking, isn't it?
Smoking,
I'm not going to. I've never been to a hypnotist, so I can't comment.
Have you? Maybe you have.
Maybe I have, and
maybe they made you forget. You never know.
They do that?
Yeah, of course.
They do that? Yeah. So Nathan, we are entering sort of the last little bit of the podcast. I suppose I have a couple of questions, Dean. I don't know if you do. My big one would be, what are you looking to achieve over the next few years with your clinic and the work that you're doing? Obviously, you're doing your PhD. Like, what are you looking to really do in the world, really, of what you're working in?
Well, we've got another baby on the way, so that's put pay to a few of my plans. So we've got another baby due in August. But amazing. I think what I want to do is really leave a legacy with my work around the sex and the porn addiction. That's the one, because the shame that it's horrendous. The shame that drives that addiction. It is to be able to maybe educate as well. I run my workshops. So it would be to leave a legacy and really get my model used in professional practice. And I'm planning on writing another book as well on that model as well. So it's just keep me ticking over. But that's the plan, to leave a legacy behind and build upon the work of my late mentor, Dr. Thaddeus Burchard, he was the pioneer of sex addiction in the UK. Build upon his work and then add my own bits to it as well. That's my aim.
Yeah, amazing. Dean, anything from you?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, at the start, you were saying about, picking the next step. So if somebody sort of has realized that they've got an addiction, or maybe they don't fully know, but they're sort of thinking, this isn't ideal. What is the next step for them?
Okay, the next step I would suggest is, NHS wouldn't advise. It's just reaching out. And again, you had a good experience at charity, Lewis. Reach out to there's some brilliant therapists who work within charities who will be doing their placements at university. So I'd highly recommend charities. But if you can afford it and you can invest in your health, have a look at privately. But I appreciate the cost. I really do. But if you're going down that route, there's websites like the Counselling Directory, Psychology Today. Have a look at are they qualified? Look at the degrees. What do they specialize in? And always ask for a 15, 20-minute consultation to make sure you're the right fit as well. So that would be the first protocol. If you think you've got a problem, finance is dependent, or even if you are struggling financially, there's AA meetings, there's Cocaine Anonymous meetings. There's also, to move away from the 12-step, there's smart recovery as well. So there's a lot of things out there. Support. The key is just reaching out and knowing where to look. So there would be the first port of call that I'd suggest.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, what I would say, and I would echo all of that from what my lived experience is, but I would also say what I found really beneficial was, so if I look at my NHS experience versus my the therapist I ended up having, he had lived experience, and that massively helped me. Someone who'd gone through it, where you can say, I don't know why I did it, or I don't know why my brain was like that. And I feel like you're so much, like when you're going through that pain of dealing with addiction or on your traumas, the fear of shame, embarrassment, like not wanting to look stupid, and all those sorts of things goes out the window when the other person goes, "Yeah, I know, I was there. I've been there myself mentally, and I made the same mistake. And actually, I can't tell you why you made the mistake, but I'll tell you it was a mistake. And what we will do is help make sure you never do make that mistake again, because I'm in that situation now." Versus saying, "Oh, I don't know how to deal with this." So yeah, I would, if I had to go through it all again, which I hope obviously I never do. I would, if I have to go through therapy again, that was more my point than a gambling addiction. I would look to make sure that whatever I was seeking treatment on, the person had an element of lived experience to really be able to resonate and understand at a deeper level, because that was super beneficial.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's why there's a lot of people in the industry who are sort of in recovery, who do this job. It helps me immensely as well, day to day, being able to help people. It helps your own recovery. And what I did also not pick up on before when you mentioned things to do to help, Dean, with my groups as well, I do offer low cost places for people who can't, if they're really struggling. Don't ever let finances be, if people are, just reach out to me. I will always do my best to accommodate people, because the biggest step is people asking for help. Yeah. And if finances are an issue, then just reach out to me, because the groups that we run, you were talking about when you shared last week, Lewis, the shame lifted. Could you imagine a room of 10 sex addicts sharing their most darkest to them? And then someone shares it, and then someone says, I did that. And then by the end of the group, the 12-week process, they're like different people. And mate, that's why I love it, because there was one chap. Have we got time for me to?
Yeah. No.
So I was working with one chap, and he was young lad, started watching sort of pornography early on. Great family, great life. But he'd escalated, unfortunately, into the illegal stuff, and then got arrested, 10-year charge. And he always said to me, if it was drinking or drugs, I'd have come out for help earlier. It's always stuck with me when he said that, because now he lost his job. It's on his sex offenders list. He wasn't a paedophile. It's just escalated to that point. And that is why that could be somebody like him reaching out to me, and I say, you can't come because you can't afford it. Yeah, didn't work like that. So that always sticks with me, that. So if there's anyone who's listening or comes across the podcast in the future, just drop me an email, and I'll do my very best to help you.
How can they get in touch? That's probably a key. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Email. So do you want me to?
Verbalize it. Yeah.
Okay, it's nathan@londoncenterforaddictions.co.uk.
Okay, I hope everyone got that, because I have to be honest. When did we last have you on? 9 months ago, 10 months ago, something like that, I presume.
Yeah, a bit longer.
Yeah, probably. And you've been such a huge supporter of the pod, and I look at you. We've never met in person. We share comments every now and then. I always look out for what you're doing. I think you're a huge inspiration for what you've done, mate. And thank you again for coming on. We're so grateful to have this sort of platform to be able to speak to people like you and share your expertise and knowledge. So thanks so much, as always, mate. Super, super, super grateful.
No,
appreciate it, Nathan.
No, it's good. It's just great to come on. And like I say, I've always loved what you do. And it's such, and listening to your, when you shared last night, really struck me. And there's a word you said, gobshite. And I thought that was me in the pub. Oh, yeah. I just thought it was like you were living my life, or vice versa. But it's just keep up this good work, because I think what you did last week is going to open the floodgates for you, because people will come back on that podcast in months and years to come as well. And the amount of people you're going to help with that, every credit to you. Take my hat off to both of you and the rest of the pod members as well. Really is brilliant.
Appreciate it very much, mate. There's lots of things we want to talk about in the future, so I'm sure you may get the hat trick ball.
Don't get many as a Palace fan.
Yeah, that's true. I
Unfortunately,
think Zaha's gone, so you're probably not going to get many, are you?
Screwed.
Benteke wasn't up to much. Yeah, no, there's lots of things we want to do. So as we get to this, we've got a really busy sort of 3 to 6 months, and then after that, there's some things I want to do around maybe guests with guests, and we maybe pull a topic up and we talk as experts around different opinions on different types of topics, because I think it's quite a fun exercise for us to do as well. So
yeah. And if you've got any charities in the Northeast who you think that would benefit from my training, just get them to drop me an email, and I'll give it them for free. They can just join, and I'll always work with charities if they want to, because they have so many. As you know, you benefited yourself from a great counsellor. So
100%. I will definitely reach out to Neca, the one that I worked with, because I still speak to. There's a person there that I still speak to, which is good. And then there's loads. So again, to all charities who listen, because I know there's quite a few charities who do listen to this podcast because they reach out. The offer there is from Nathan. I would definitely get in touch with him. You never know, he might just be able to change your service massively for the better. So yes. Nathan, thank you very much for joining us again. We are so grateful, mate. Listeners, I hope you had an amazing time learning all about addiction to the next stage versus just hearing my story, which is great. Next week, we have our potentially new host, Yasmin, coming on the pod. She works with me at my actual day job when I'm not on a nighttime, saving Dean from being with his wife, getting on a podcast. So she's going to come on next week, share her story. She's gone through some stuff fairly recently with her and her partner have, which they're going to share. And we will catch you next week. Anything from you guys?
No.
Keep on the good work. Thanks for coming on, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Take care, chaps. Take care.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Peace.